Deirdre Connolly. Deirdre is the executive producer of Bravo's Watch What Happens Live with Andy Cohen. Since 2009, WWHL, as insiders and fans know it, has become a late night and pop culture phenomenon, hosting guests like Hillary Clinton, Lady Gaga, Meryl Streep, Julie Andrews, Mindy Kaling, Jimmy Fallon, and Oprah. Prior to her role at Watch What Happens Live, Deirdre was a producer at MTV's Total Request Live, which led her to temporarily relocate to London to launch TRL for MTV UK. As a prominent female leader in late night, Deirdre has been featured in the LA Times, the Washington Post, Boston College Magazine, and Glamour. And I firmly believe that her success is a direct reflection of her passion and commitment to those around her, and a love of making great television, and now for many, many years, live television. Welcome to the podcast, my friend and neighbor, Deirdre.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
I am thrilled. How many years now has it been since the launch of Watch What Happens Live?
So we are in July, we'll be celebrating 14 years.
Okay, so we are speaking in April of 2023. So July 2023, that is such an extraordinary thing to think about in television, which is such a vulnerable world to enter professionally, to have had a job for that many years in the same place.
It is, I honestly, unheard of. Like, I don't really know any other friend who has this situation.
Yeah,
so
and to
very
really
lucky.
grow something in the way that you've been able to grow it with Andy. So I want to go back because, listeners have heard Andy's episode on this podcast and have a real sense of sort of where his passions and aspirations sort of crashed together in this incredible way and launched him into the world of Bravo, both as a content creator and a host. And the idea of him becoming host over executive wasn't really what he expected at the beginning. So can you go back to early days? I mean, we're talking in the middle of like Vanderpump Rules cultural phenomenon moment. So I'm sure your life has been very busy around that.
Yes.
But we'll end there, but let's go back to the beginning of how, like, what did you think this was going to be when you first started?
Good question. I thought it was going to be a summer job. I started in June of 2009, or maybe May of 2009. And I think we were doing 10 episodes Thursday nights, midnight over the summer. And I just, at that time, I had been at MTV for probably a decade. And my objective was just to shake up my network. I just wanted to meet new people, broaden my horizons, meet people at other networks. So beyond the 3 months, I had no expectations other than making new contacts for other jobs. So, and then I think before the summer ended, we got picked up for another, probably through the end of that year, I guess, took us through December of 2009. And then before that came up, we got picked up for maybe 6 more months, kind of incrementally. And then by the end of 2010, I think we had a 2-year pickup, which was just, like you said, unheard of. I mean, there's very little job security in this industry. So I was thrilled beyond.
I'm trying to remember timeline. I mean, as you know, I've known Andy in my personal life, like since he was at CBS for so long. And I knew that he always just had this other thing that he loved, which was pop culture. Like it was just something that he loved. Like he could do highbrow news and love Susan Lucci, like more than life itself. So I also know, in having the lovely, benefit of having coffee with you in real life, knowing that you as sort of a political science major and sort of a very serious human also kind of have a love for pop culture and sort of both things live inside of you. So where did your own sort of love and fascination for things that weren't intellectually stimulating, perhaps, the distraction and fun of pop culture, like how did that show up in your life?
And honestly, MTV, I loved MTV so much. I mean, I am sure people of my generation can remember the moments where they saw, where the countdown to the new Michael Jackson video was happening, or, I just don't think there's anything like that. So it was really, and we didn't have cable, so I'd have to go over to like my friend's cousin's house to watch MTV. And
Right.
it really just had a big impact on, I loved music. I loved stories behind bands and like knowing things about musicians and pop culture and everything. So I think in terms of like my first love of pop culture, definitely was MTV, coming home, watching The Grind and all those shows after school and stuff like that.
But
So
that was huge. Like for people, we grew up at the same time. The idea of behind the scenes, access to behind the scenes of something was so new to us. Now it's literally like breathing for kids. Like they have
exactly.
no idea that there was once a time where you didn't know everything in real time about everyone. And so it was like candy, right? Like sort of getting to absorb and learn about these iconic people, what they were like when they weren't doing their art, where they weren't performing, was just this unbelievable, and that they were giving you access to it. It wasn't like reading the Inquirer online at the checkout counter, which was also a very valuable way to get your celebrity news. Which was never like, you don't know growing up, oh, that's all made up, right? Like you think, oh, it's in print, it must be real. So the idea of artists and celebrities being able to take back their own narrative or control the narrative a little bit was kind of this
Yeah,
extraordinary
that's true.
thing for us as consumers and for them as the people being sort of put in a fishbowl. So let's go back. I'm trying to remember, were the reunions already happening on Bravo before Watch What Happens Live launched?
I think honestly, only maybe one or two reunions had happened. I think Andy
Okay.
hosted the New York reunion and the Orange County reunion. So he was a familiar face to me because I was a Bravo watcher, but it wasn't Andy Cohen. I remember we met. I was like, oh yeah, okay. I'm familiar with this guy. I've seen him host that reunion, but I didn't have much context for him. So I guess in a lot of ways we were doing it to this experiment together, and like you said, he wasn't sure about if host would trump becoming, being the executive producer. So we were kind of on this ride of forging a new career path for both of us together.
Had you ever done sort of, I know that when you started at MTV, TRL already existed,
Mhm.
and the train had left the station, and so you were sort of learning it, but it existed. And then you had an opportunity to go to the UK and bring it and sort of be on the creator side of the thing. So can you take me back to what you remember of like day one? You're introduced to Andy. I don't know if there are a bunch of people in the room with you or if it's really just the two of you spitballing together. Like, what was the first meeting like and what happened?
Well, my first meeting about Watch What Happens Live was actually with Michael Davies and this woman, Jen Kelly, who worked at Embassy Row, who produces Watch What Happens Live. And Michael's background was Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, Wife Swap, big format shows, but he really loved game shows. That was his thing. He loves game shows. He's currently the executive producer of Jeopardy. So we actually really bonded over our love of multi-camera shows, format shows, studio shows, live especially, and kind of the temperament that it takes to be a live producer, which is being calm, knowing that you have a plan B, plan C, and being able to implement it quickly. And so then I met Andy in a bigger group after that, and he also is a TV producer and he comes from live TV. So he has the same temperament, like the sky is not going to fall. Nothing's that big of a deal. Let's have fun and let's see what happens, And so I think just from the onset, we were all very like-minded in terms of our approach to what TV should be, which is fun, getting a little juice out of it and, not having behind the scenes culture that is relaxed and create, like to inspire creativity, not to be so crazy, intense. You know, sometimes live TV can be that way. And so I think we all kind of really did have this innate ability to just really approach it with this fun, like with a fun lens, I guess.
At the beginning, I mean, obviously Andy, because he's been in New York for so long, because some of his great friends were actors in his personal life, he knew a lot of celebrities just as friends. Was the idea early on, like, we'll have someone from one of our Bravo shows mix with a more known personality, or did it just start out as Bravo celebrities coming on WWHL? What was the original idea for the guest part of it?
Well, Andy had been hosting this BravoTV.com only show. I think he went to somewhere in New Jersey to do this random show that was actually after Top Chef and maybe after Project Runway, where it would just be a post show talking about the show that had just aired. So there was some sort of format of just talking about Bravo. So the original intention was to just always be sort of a post show for Bravo once a week. At that time, there was only one. There was, I think, Orange County, New York, and New Jersey, and they were never airing at the same time.
Okay.
So it would be just the one night a week that Housewives was airing. We would be on after that with a Bravo celebrity.
Okay.
And yeah, that was the original idea.
So how did it turn into, I mean, Oprah, right? Like Oprah was a guest. I think if I recall, Oprah was a solo. I don't think there were two guests on that.
Yes. She was pretty early on in
yes.
I can't remember what year, but it was pretty early on.
I feel like 2012, 2013, because I think The Butler, her movie The Butler was out. And so I think she was promoting The Butler, but then she was really game to be on the show. So talk about early days, game show love, Bravo content, housewife content. We know Andy is a great conversationalist, so you know he can handle the banter. The idea of, like, we're going to have Jackal, Mazel of the Day, Lead the Fifth, like the games that have become touchstones that people come to expect. Like, it doesn't matter who the guest is. We know there's going to be someone behind a bar. Like, it's evolved over time. At the very beginning, did you sort of pitch, like, what if we do this at the beginning, and you get to, like, how much did you get to put your own imprint on it, or did that happen over time?
Both, really, because it's such an unique TV story. You know, we were pitching ourselves as this little cheap engine that could. So there was 4 of us producing it. The stakes were pretty low for Bravo. There was very low cost. We were in a studio that didn't even really have air conditioning. So it was allowed to grow. And there wasn't this giant overhead of this big, huge studio with 200 people in the audience and monologues and all these things that would make it so high pressure to work. Right. We were able to kind of like take it step by step. So in the beginning, we had this loose format that, like, we would come out of the show and talk about the 3 big things that happened. Then we'd play a game in Act 2, and then we would do his Mazel Jackal. So that was sort of like the original idea. I worked that out with Andy early on, and one of our writers. And then it just was it had breathing room, because there wasn't this, like, oh my goodness, this, like, we have so much invested in this, it has to work. So It grew really kind of, to use the word organically, it seems overused, but it's
true in this case,
you know. And then we got to build, like, oh, wouldn't it be funny if we did this game, or like had a bartender, and we didn't have an audience. I think Andy's probably, like, Hickey came down to visit, and then we liked the idea that there were people laughing in the studio, so we put chairs around the cameras, and had, I think, 20 people in there. So really everything grew, like, step by step,
right?
we all had, which is the best way to have something. Even now, I think every idea that we have has many people's fingerprints on it. It's very collaborative, and it just grows out of small little kernels of ideas, you know.
So now there's BravoCon. There are these, how many Real Housewives are there right now? Shows?
10, I believe.
10. And then you have the Below Decks and the summer. I mean, there are many, many, many shows. I know that Andy is only involved still as a producer, I think, of the Housewives, but
Yep.
all of these shows fall under the Bravo umbrella of reality candy that we all get to escape with. When did the idea of not just having guests be on the reality shows, but having, I guess my question is, when did you realize there was this fandom, not just in the world of like regular people, but the idea that like, oh my God, Kristen Chenoweth is also obsessed with this show. Like, when did you realize, how did that start coming up that, oh my God, all these celebrities, not just like people who found these shows to be aspirational, people also living those lives were watching the show?
Yeah, you know, we were really born around the same time as Twitter. So we were joining this conversation and like being able to see that people were reacting, like, you know, and it was celebrities reacting to the Real Housewives of New Jersey. Like, they can't believe this table flip happened and all this stuff. So, and it was definitely being reflected in ratings as well. You know, we were on at this weird time slot, midnight on a Thursday, I think was the first, and then we were at midnight on a Sunday or something. And we were getting phenomenal numbers, and then realizing that this is beyond just a little teeny conversation with a few fans, you know? So Twitter really allowed us to connect with people that were watching and fans, and seeing their fandom. You know, Tina Fey was one of our early guests too. And she had this, I can't remember exactly the quote, but just saying like, I watch this and I just want to be in there. Like, I want, like, it seems like Watch What Happens Live seems like a place, not a show, because it's like Andy's clubhouse and it's this whole lifestyle, you know, more than it is just like a studio. So I think people had an idea that it really was an extension, which it is, of Bravo, but also this pop culture, funny, unique. And Andy's so, because he was a TV producer, he's so confident in his decisions, who he is and what this show was going to be. And we just really leaned into him. And it was so nice to build something around somebody who did have a really unique point of view, was a good conversationalist, said always that this is what I would do if I was hosting people at my home. I would have people who may or may not know each other very well over, offer them a cocktail and just start, you know, finding out more about them, having a normal conversation. We don't do pre-interviews. We don't have canned stories. We don't do any of the things that typically happen on late night shows. So it really, yeah, I guess I'm not sure if I'm answering the question, but
100%, the organic nature of it,
Yeah.
and using Andy's role in his real life, who he
yes,
is to his
absolutely. I mean,
friends.
even the clubhouse was completely modeled. I'm sure you remember he had a room that had like that dark paneling in his apartment a long time ago. And it was just,
Yeah, that apartment has
yeah,
that's
the
not the
apartment's come a
apartment
long
anymore.
way.
Talk about, I think, you know, a lot of my listeners will know this movie. Many won't know this movie just because of, you know, I'm aging myself, but network, broadcast news, there's certain films that show the behind the scenes, Soap Dish, if you love soaps, there's
Yep.
these kind of touchstone movies that give us a heightened glimpse of what it is to do something live. So can you take us through what your part in this, first of all, if it's on at 10:15 last night and I'm watching post Vanderpump Rules, your show.
Yes.
When do you get into the office? What is your day? What are you doing during the show? I was such a newbie. I didn't even realize Andy had like an earpiece in his ear, like a real, you know, news person, a real show. Tell me what you're doing in your life once it's on a show day.
So we go in late, we used to go in, I think just because there's an idea that you should be at work during the day, we would go in early, and then COVID undid all of those things. So we go in, last night, we actually taped 2 shows, but go in around 6 p.m., 5:30, 6 o'clock, and just start going through the shows, looking at all the clips and scripts and everything. Then Andy will come in, read through the script just in the control room, making sure things are in his voice, or if he wants to tweak anything or something feels too long, we just go through it. And then everyone takes their places basically and starts taking care of their little piece of the pie, whether that's getting their props in place or setting up the bartenders. We're looking at those shots, getting talent prepped. So where I am sitting in the control room on a headset in Andy's ear with my colleagues, John, Jude, and Melissa. And we really it's like not what people think in terms of high pressure. It's really fun. We have a lot of laughs. It's a very fun, upbeat environment, so we're making decisions on the fly, telling Andy how much time he has left in something, if he wants to kill a game. Like last night, for example, with Lala and Gillian, who was an amazing guest because she's so knowledgeable about Bravo, but we had games prepped, but there's so much fodder to go through with Vanderpump right now that Andy was just like, saying, like, doing this motion of like, let's kill this. So we're killing games and just keeping the conversation going. So just kind of reacting to what's going on. And also people are monitoring what the conversation is online. So that's really our origins, is kind of, it is a fan show. It's a conversation. We're keeping a conversation going. So we're seeing what people were saying on Twitter, getting all those questions, so that we are really showing A, that we're live, B, that we're responding to the most talked about moments. And if people have responses to something that Lala said, we're seeing what it is and being able to incorporate that into the show in real time.
When you say last night you shot 2 shows, so Jillian Jacobs and Lala Kent were on last night, and I don't know what's the other.
So then we pre-tape it. We pre-tape usually our Thursday shows, just the way the schedule works out. So we taped our Thursday show last night at
with the same audience. Did they get
No,
to
we
see
have
2
always
shows?
have a different audience, and we serve cocktails, and people come in. It's like, it is really a fun night out for people. They go to dinner, come over to Watch What Happens Live, have drinks. It's not such a long commitment. It's only half an hour. So we load in our audience about half an hour before the show starts. And, but yeah, we have separate audiences.
So over the years, there have been different things that have happened. I think the Teresa flipping over the table in the restaurant probably was the first. I mean, maybe there are others. I remember, in terms of something happening when you think of memes, right? When you think of ways in which something goes viral from a TV show, Allison Janney doing the jackal on the West Wing is an example of, if you say the jackal, if you are a West Wing fan, everyone across the globe knows what you are referring to. And there were many memes that were made of that, or GIFs, or whatever the thing is that repeats and repeats and repeats on the internet. And in your world, in the Bravo world, there was definitely that. And there have been, the season where Kim and Kyle have like a big fight in a limousine about her, the reveal of her alcoholism, right? And what the impact was on their family, like such a personal thing that we'd been watching all season, some dysfunction, but then suddenly like 2 sisters in front of the world having what was one of the most brutal possible fights that 2 people could have.
Yes.
So I think people have, I know you're producing Watch What Happens Live, which is different than producing a Real Housewives show, but you might be able to answer this question, and feel free to say, not my lane, don't want to talk about it. How real is reality television as you understand it? We know it is not scripted, but when you think of, and I believe no one told Teresa to flip the table, or no one told Aviva to throw her prosthetic leg across the room. But so there are obviously very organic, real emotional moments that happen. Do you have a sense of how it works when you are on an unscripted reality show, but it is produced? So what does that mean to you?
Well, like you said, I don't have anything to do with it. So my understanding is probably similar to yours, but I always, when people will ask me, of course, thinking I do have something to do with it, but I always explain it's like the situations themselves may not be that authentic, right? Like you might not go to the party of somebody you really hate, but you are going to go because
You are obligated contractually
you're obligated
to go to this
to
party.
do these things with people. But it would be like me having to constantly negotiate life with somebody who I long ago decided I hate this person. So it's real because this person pushes all of your buttons and you get so hyped up because you're like, ah. So I think inauthentic part is that in reality, you probably would just not make time for that person. But so I think the situations maybe just like, are created, but the actual drama and people's reaction to those situations and how they feel about seeing all of these people is real. I mean, they're not good enough actors to convince us otherwise, and like, so the decisions that they're making are their own and how they're responding to certain, like, but I guess it's sort of like being in a little pressure cooker, you're obligated to do these certain things within a certain window of time. And in that time, you're going to get stirred up because there's somebody there that just is not your cup of tea,
When you were doing TRL, were you also in the booth running the show, or was this something you learned how to do on Watch What Happens Live in the way that you're doing it now?
I started entry level at TRL. And by the end, I was in the host's ears talking and stuff like that. But it was so, what you said earlier, it had already been formatted. It was a whole different vibe of, it was much more structured. We had this video countdown and there was a lot more eyeballs on it from a network perspective, I think, in terms of like responding to ratings and things like that. So by the time I was in that position, I don't think I felt real ownership over it because it didn't feel like my show, I guess, in a way, in the same way that this did. This was building something from the ground up, being able to set the tone, and trying to figure out like what it is to manage a team that's new to maybe live TV and inspire them to be creative and rise to the occasion and all that stuff. So I felt way more ownership than I ever did, even at the end of Total Request Live.
Did you sort of have to fake it till there's the fake it till you make it sort of term, and you are slowly as you said, you sort of were able to, do you want to take a quick?
I'm so sorry.
Don't be sorry. Do we have a special guest star?
I don't know. This is my daughter, Isla. Sorry.
Hi, Isla.
Hello, Alana. Sorry,
yeah,
Alana.
I got to meet you once. You were with your doggy.
Yeah, I don't know. Okay, good night. Sorry.
Bye. Well, I actually, you know what? That's a perfect segue. As a theater actress, my job is, I mean, we do some matinees, but I go to work at night, right? I'm on the night shift. And in some ways, it was sort of perfect as a parent because I got so much, I could go to the thing at the school, right? I could actually be around during the day, but missed a lot of bedtimes and that part of our life. So that's why I was asking if the show, and obviously it's not every single day, and there's hiatuses and times where you can go on vacations with your family if you're lucky enough to do so. But how has having that sweet little angel child that just came into our room for a minute, how are you handling the balance of that What's the fun of it? Does she get to go to work with you sometimes? What's her understanding of what you do? She's still little, but curious how that has impacted your life.
It's so lucky. I mean, not only what I was saying before about just being employed by one show for this long, but to really have it feel like a second family, so that having an event like this happen at 45 years old, and, I'm able to completely strike the balance that I need to. And to your point, working at night isn't so bad because I'm home a lot more during the day. I can do all those school things. And I think we have way more time together, certainly than if I had a 9 to 5 job, leaving early in the morning and coming back just before dinner or something like that. So yeah, it's kind of like having just something that you need to navigate. Oh, because it really changes a lot. But then it's also just such a blessing, and it's great. And Andy had kids late in life too, so we're kind of in the same boat in terms of like feeling a little tired, more tired than I think if we did it 15 years ago. And just trading stories about kid stuff. And yeah, it really feels I feel very lucky to have had this job, not just for the longevity of it, but the actual culture of it, to be able to have a kid at this time and, be able to make my own schedule in some ways too. Like if I can't be there, it's not the end of the world.
Yeah. I mean, in my world, you have understudies. What happens? Is there someone who can step in if
Oh
you weren't
yeah, for
feeling well? Like,
sure.
how does that work?
Early on when we were 4 people, no, but I have such a great team. It really is the single best part of the show. I get to work with one of my longtime best friends, John Jude. He's been on the show almost since day one, and he's my partner in everything pretty much there. So he steps up. He stepped up on my maternity leave. So yeah, it's great. It really is just the best job ever. And I will always think that no matter what happens next.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure you have many people approaching you. You did the thing, which was you took a little flame and you made it into this huge cultural touchstone. And I'm sure many people are vying for your attention and hoping that you can do the same for their brand down the line. It would be impossible to have you on the show today and not talk about what's been going on, because you are at the center of a reality show that has taken over for reasons that I wonder if you can talk about, which is there are people on a reality show who had an affair with each other. That's basically, I mean, that happens in every workplace all over the world. That's just what happens. And it's awful, and cheating is awful, and people take sides in real life. But now there has been this spotlight and attention focused on 2 people who worked at a restaurant called Sir that has just become
Inescapable
for them as the humans involved in the story, and for the rest of us who just happen to know about it to varying degrees, from me who watches the show to CNN who have what like that ticker tape thing at the bottom. Why do you think at this moment in time, with all that is going on in the world politically, and the war in Ukraine, and Trump is now on trial, like, what is it? Right? I mean, I know why I think reality television is delicious, but what is it about this story that if you want to just riff on that, I mean, there's no right answer, but
right.
What do you
I
think?
honestly have yet to hear the right explanation or something that fully makes sense to me, because, Vanderpump is a popular show. I think last season it a little bit waned as they were like bringing in new people. But I did not realize, I heard from people who I did not think had even heard of Bravo that were like, what is going on with this guy, with Scandoval? Like, what do you know? And it really shocked me. I've never honestly, in 14 years doing this, we haven't had any Erica Jane, Jen Shaw, nothing has compared to the amount of excitement around it, I guess, and just like obsession over like really poring over each scene of the show, watching it back, trying to understand when this happened, what's the timeline. That it's like, these amateur detectives really going through all of the footage and figuring out like what happened when. So I have no idea. I don't really know. But it is, even though there's, the sad side of it actually happening to real people.
Right.
But it is energizing in this weird way. We're like, it's so nice to see how people are so rabid about Bravo. We're doing BravoCon again this year and going into it with this kind of like true, I guess, scandal and fandom on our hands just makes it so much even more exciting. Like I always say, when TRL was teenagers screaming in Times Square for Beyonce, Eminem, Britney, all that stuff. So it was like being at the epicenter of this like pop culture phenomenon, and people were so rabid about all of this stuff. And Bravo is that. Like now walking around last year at BravoCon, I'm like, it's like TRL, but 40-year-old women, they are freaking out at seeing the Real Housewives of Beverly Hills and just clamoring to get their photo ops and merch and all this stuff. And I'm like, it's fascinating to me. And I don't think there's any other network that could pull off a con on that level, people freaking out about stuff. And I think, just to answer the question, I think there's something about them duping the cameras that's kind of fascinating to people, like that it was going on the entire time that this season was being shot. And like, then questions like, what is the reality? What are people presenting versus what's happening? And kind of like, there's something so fascinating that they were able to get away with this thing, and that they were setting up decoys, and like, it's sort of diabolical that they were able to pull this off and be so cavalier about it. You're like, what, so I think that's part of it. But I don't know. I couldn't answer why it's taking over every single part of every social media.
I'm sure. Right. I mean, it's like the Truman Show when Jim Carrey's character, we as the audience know that he's onto it, but the people running the show don't know yet. And then at the very end, and also I keep thinking about like, Andy is always, and I'm sure you are too, in some ways taken to task. And in some ways it's a legitimate question. I feel like Dan Rather or someone asked him, like, how do you feel about the housewives? Right.
Mm-hmm.
Like, do you feel like they've ruined society as we know it, or enhanced society as we know it in some way? That's an extreme. I don't remember if that's exactly how he said it, but that was the sentiment.
Yeah.
You guys get asked that a lot in terms of, do you feel like what you're creating is helping us as a society, or a detriment, or neither? Just exists in its own lane.
Neither, I guess, but if I was going to tip the scale, I think in a way it's enhancing. I think Lena Waithe said it really well on our show, that women don't have to all be one thing. They can be messy, and you don't have, this idea. I think, we were brought up to default to politeness, being the kind of people that just like, women are conditioned to kind of take a lot of crap and just be like, okay, that's no problem,
to be fake.
I think be fake and really kind of hold a lot in. And I think that there's a lot to be said for women who don't do that, and seeing, like, even if they're kind of, you're like, why is that making them freak out so much? But just taking ownership over their emotions and feeling unapologetic that they're upset and voicing their opinions and getting mad, and like, that's good in my opinion. And
also what I always find remarkable, and I swear to God, I've tried to use it in my own family life. I don't have these kind of relationships with friends. They're not volatile at all. At this point, it's sort of what you were saying. Like, if I don't want to go to the party, I'm not going to go to the party. And if that person and it's like, I'm able to pick and choose.
Exactly.
It's certainly not always in a work setting, but in my personal life setting. But the ways in which I have found the most remarkable thing about it is their ability to forgive. Like
Yeah.
people, I mean, if you look at these reunions, which are just like the show on steroids, like all those seasons coming to a head, the things that people say to each other, and they mean it in the moment, or the hurts, or the whatever has been brewing, there's this way in which it's like this incredible therapy session where people say their deepest, darkest thoughts about a situation or another
Right.
person, and they get through it.
Right.
And many of
Conflict
them,
resolution.
yes, and they remain. I feel like Andy should go and like Israel, like he
I
could
know that's my
really
political science
broker.
background, you know.
Yes, like you guys. Well, that I love on the show too. That you are able to share your political beliefs or
Mhm.
your human beliefs,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And you have a huge platform. And I feel like the thing that I am so in awe of and in love with is this fearlessness in talking about who the jackals are.
Yeah.
And really shining a light. A lot of people who watch those shows may not even be aware of certain things going on in the world. And I think it is like this incredible educational platform. I kid you
Yeah.
not, the way you have decided with Andy what we're going to shine a light on.
Yeah.
And being such advocates for all the things that we know to be right and
Yeah.
true. I think it is one of the most beautiful parts of this show, that not only is it highly entertaining, you know, I always think about how Andy talked about his feeling as a soap opera lover, that Real
Yeah.
Housewives is an extension of that thing. I mean, soaps are mostly gone. We're down
Yeah.
to one or two, and that there's something about when we were talking about why are Tom and Raquel, who've had this affair and our desire to hold Ariana in our arms like we would a friend who's been betrayed in some way.
Right.
It really harkens back to the ways in which people watch soap operas every single day.
Right. Like Who Shot JR? It's our
Who
new
shot JR? And is, you know, Erica going to come out of the coma? Like whatever it is,
right. Luke
we
and
believe.
Laura.
Oh my God. I was in an earthquake in LA. I was living in Laurel Canyon, and it's my first night, and there's this huge, that Northridge earthquake, and it's 4 a.m. and it's pitch black. And I'm like, I've been walking on crushed glass to get out to my street. And under the street lamp, I see a neighbor come out, and it's Laura.
Oh my
It's
God.
Jeannie Francis.
Oh my God.
And I'm like, it's like all the light bulbs broke and I'm like bleeding from my face. And she's like, are you all right? And I'm like, I think I've died because I'm so out of
Why are
it.
you here?
And Laura from General Hospital is pulling like little shards of glass.
Wow.
And I literally was like, if I died, I'm okay.
This makes
Because look,
sense.
Jeannie Francis, like my childhood, my entire childhood.
That's so funny.
Right? Like that's how real she was to me. And the fact that I got to meet her at my most vulnerable, scared moment in my life was like, I do believe in God now, because look who's here. I think what you have done is so inspirational. I think knowing how many women you bring into work with you, how friendly everything about your show is to every group of people who may feel disenfranchised in some way. Thank you for that. I feel like my daughter knows there are places in the world and spaces in the world where she can be herself, because people like you are opening doors in that way. Before I let you go, because you have other things to do today other than talk to me. Is there a little known fact about you that you can share?
I'm going to try to make this a short story. So when I was between my sophomore and junior year of college, I went to Bolivia to teach English. And while I was there, my friend and I were approached by this photographer to ask us if we would appear on the social pages of the newspaper to commemorate the 4th of July. So we were like, yeah, of course. Why wouldn't we? That's so fun. So then we get into this photo shoot where we are dressed up in the weirdest stuff, caked in makeup. I was in sort of like a weird halter top of the American flag, like thigh high cowboy boot stuff. And I'm like, we were trying to kind of push back, but where there was a language barrier. And then, like I said, defaulting to being polite. So getting kind of led down this road of like just these really awful pictures. Anyway, so we end up on the cover of these social pages of this newspaper. And then, but there were other pictures, and my friends from college would every once in a while just pull out a picture of me in like a cowboy hat and these like terrible skanky boots and all this stuff, and be like, just a reminder, you did this. So
do you still have it somewhere? Can I put it up on my Instagram?
It takes my breath away, even 28 years later or whatever. I'm like, I cannot believe that I allowed this to happen. So yeah, but yeah, that's my little known fact. I am on the social pages of a cover of Social Page magazine somewhere
in Bolivia.
Yeah, in the 90s.
You're like the Brooke Shields of Bolivia.
Yes, we have the same type of career.
Exactly. We'll do a documentary on how you were exploited in Bolivia. Deirdre, thank you for coming on. I'm so grateful
to you, Lana.
you.
This was so fun.
I'm so glad. All right, hang on
and
one
I'm sure
second.
I'll see you at the coffee shop.
I hope so, in 5 minutes. Let's go meet.